Just a few days ago, many of you heard the testimony delivered by freed hostage Amit Susana here in the UN. She recounted her ordeal in chilling detail. Chained alone by the ankle, unable to move, and repeatedly sexually assaulted by a Hamas terrorist guard. She was forced to enter the bathroom at gunpoint, her guard subjecting her to disturbing questions and violations, knowing full well what was going to happen next. After the assault, she was forbidden even to cry or show emotion. In her appeal to member states, she begged for urgent action to secure the release of others still held captive, warning against the blind eye she feels has turned to their suffering. Given how little the hostages are mentioned by so many, it seems the blind eye she pleaded you not to turn is still blind to their suffering. However, we will not look away. We will not forget. To any hostage who might hear me, we will never forget you, never abandon you, and never stop until you are all safely home. Colleagues, each of you will speak today about UNRWA, but I have been speaking about the UNRWA's infiltration for years. In the last year, we have exposed UNRWA Gaza as a terrorist front, camouflaged as a humanitarian agency. Its payroll resembles a most wanted list rather than an aid organization. The scandals which have exposed UNRWA Gaza are almost too many to count. Nearly every time we gather here, I have new outrageous information to share on UNRWA. Less than 2 weeks ago, I shared that an UNRWA clinic was acting as a weapons storage and launch site, disguised by the blue banner of the UN. Less than a week before that, we exposed that the head of their teachers' union in Lebanon moonlighted as a Hamas commander. Or more accurately, he was a Hamas terrorist moonlighting as an UNRWA teacher. Now I can share the details of the elimination of Muhammad Abu Itiwi. He had been employed by UNRWA since July 2022. It therefore cannot be a shock that he was also a commander in Hamas's vile Nukba forces. He personally participated in and directed the brutal murder, rape, and kidnapping of Israeli civilians on October 7. Let me repeat, while Muhammad Abu Itiwi was collecting UN-funded paychecks every month, he was murdering and kidnapping Israeli civilians. It was Abu Itiwi who led the savage rampage on the bomb shelter in Re'im in southern Israel. Dozens of young people hid for their lives while their friends were being raped and murdered at the Nova Music Festival. Abu Itiwi led his men in murdering almost all of the young people hiding in the shelter and kidnapping the survivors. A UN paycheck was waiting for him in his letterbox when he went back to Gaza. After we delivered justice to this terrorist, UN officials had the audacity to mourn him. The Secretary General himself expressed outrage at his elimination. The Secretary General of the United Nations condemned the death of a terrorist who led some of the most vicious assaults on innocent civilians in modern history. Do not misunderstand me. It is legitimate to engage in debate. It is legitimate to criticize us. What is entirely illegitimate is to cover your eyes, to dismiss, to ignore what is clearly before you. It is not legitimate, nor it is moral, to ignore the indisputable fact that UNRWA Gaza has become a front for Hamas. Yet, that is exactly what the Secretary General is doing. I have often spoken in this chamber about the necessity of moral clarity. Yet the reactions from this institution and its leader to the elimination of a terrorist make it clear that clarity is lost. Look at this picture. You can see Faisal Ali Muslim El Naami in the black shirt. Here is seen loading the lifeless body of Jonathan Samerano into his car, a grotesque trophy bound for Gaza after his terrorist comrades murdered Jonathan at Kibbutz Be'eri. An UNRWA employee, while he's being paid by the UN, is inside Israel. There is also a video showing him collecting bodies and driving them into Gaza. When you look at this horrific image, one must ask, how does kidnapping and killing civilians fit into an UNRWA employee's job description? Where in UNRWA's mandate is this justified? And do UNRWA's mandate allow it? UNRWA donors know how their funds are being used? How can any nation or official defend such a monster? How can any one of you allow him to remain involved in humanitarian efforts? These are not aid workers. These are savages who have seized UNRWA Gaza and transformed it into a Hamas chapter. These heinous criminal scandals can no longer be swept under the rug, no longer ignored. This Council, the international community, and the entire UN must accept the reality that UNRWA Gaza is beyond redemption, beyond saving, beyond reform. We must turn a new page now. While our hostages continue to be tormented by the terrorist captors in conditions we cannot begin to imagine, while UNRWA continues to provide cover for terrorists, Israel has been hard at work delivering humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. On average, over 108 trucks have entered Gaza daily for weeks. Yet, as of last week, there were 700 trucks filled with aid awaiting collection inside Gaza. Their contents are rotting away in the sun. It is clear to all those unblinded by political agenda that Israel has gone above and beyond its humanitarian obligations. The problem isn't the flow of aid, it is Hamas. Hamas hijacks supplies, storing or selling them to fuel their terror machine, while Gaza's civilians are neglected. Israel remains committed to working with our partners to deliver aid to those in need. But as long as Hamas exploits these resources, true humanitarian relief cannot reach the people of Gaza. We continue our humanitarian efforts. In particular, we have dedicated significant attention and resources to coordinating medical aid and assistance. Last week, the second round of the polio vaccination campaign was completed in southern Gaza in collaboration with WHO and UNICEF. This second stage saw almost 300,000 children under the age of 10 being vaccinated, with the campaign commencing in northern Gaza in the coming days. We also continue to facilitate the transfer of patients and medical staff to other hospitals. For example, on October 24th, our forces facilitated the transfer of patients, mostly children, from the Kamal Adwan Hospital to other hospitals in Gaza. And we thank our partners for their collaboration in such efforts. Colleagues, while Israel meets its humanitarian obligation in the south, fighting barbaric terrorists, we continue to drive Hezbollah from our border as they launched relentless attacks against our civilians. Another civilian was killed last night. However, it is not only our civilians whose lives Hezbollah risks. As we operate in southern Lebanon, our forces have located and dismantled dozens of tunnel shafts and terrorist infrastructure, eliminated dozens of terrorists, and located massive amounts of weapons. In one particular discovery, a weapons store containing grenade launchers, missiles, RPGs, and other weapons were hidden inside a mosque in the heart of a civilian neighborhood in Lebanon. These outrageous violations of Resolution 1701 and 1559, as well as basic laws of morality and decency, cannot be overstated. We have also proven time and time again the exploitation of unified positions by Hezbollah. We have presented mountains of evidence of Hezbollah, tunnels, bases, weapons, and observation posts placed within meters of UNIFIL bases. This situation cannot continue. UNIFIL neglected its reporting obligations on these flagrant violations for the past 2 decades. There must be change, and that change can only begin when we uproot Hezbollah from southern Lebanon, protecting Israeli and Lebanese civilians, along with the peacekeepers themselves. The Council must remember that the enemies we face do not care for human life. They do not care for the well-being of those they pretend to protect. They have only one aim: death and destruction. We have been under attack from 7 fronts for over a year now. We will continue to carry out all necessary operations in accordance with international law to ensure the safe and secure return of our 70,000 internal refugees. Mr. President, as we approach the 77th anniversary of the vote on the UN partition plan, some are under the impression that the UN somehow gifted Israel to the Jewish people, and that this gift must now be placed under a microscope. But make no mistake, you gifted us nothing. The land of Israel has been our homeland for over 3,000 years. That UN resolution was accepted by Israel, but was immediately rejected by the Arab states. Not only was it rejected, but it was also used as an opportunity to launch an invasion. They had every intention to wipe us from the face of the earth. Yet it was our strength, our resilience, our commitment that saved us from extermination. Today, that very same strength, resilience, and commitment empowers us once more, driving us to stand against the barbarism and evil which seeks to destroy us again. Do not forget, Israel was forged through our sacrifice, our blood, not your words. While our state is no longer an infant, we still face new and constant threats from those who desire our extinction. The international community should correct historic wrongs and support us in our efforts to defend our state and people. It must not continue to unfairly scrutinize Israel and enable the terrorists who still to this day hold our civilians hostage. To conclude, I would like to ask each of you to take a moment, not now, later today, when you go back to your residence, put yourselves in our shoes. Imagine for a minute your country, surrounded on all sides by enemies attacking your people, your families, your homes, striving for your destruction. Ask yourselves frankly, what would you do? Thank you, Mr. President.